Hello, hello. Good morning. Good morning.
Kaselelia Mike, I'm jealous of your pretty background that you've developed. Yolanda Kaselelia Mike and Nicole Kaselelia Mike, and who's in the middle? Shannon?
Right.
Shannon. How are you all doing?
We're very good. Thank you. How about you?
Thank you, Yolanda and Nicole. So good to see you both. I'm so proud. You make our nation so proud. What can I say? Congratulations, Nicole. This is our first opportunity to talk.
Yes,
beautiful.
Thank you for joining us today.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Minsang Wow, Nasaraning, Tuo, Mogating. Good morning and happy Cultural Day. Welcome to Talk Story with His Excellency, President David Panuelo, and the one and only Nicole Yamase. I'm Yolanda, and I'll be serving as your moderator for today's conversation. And this is going to be a really just fun and celebratory conversation, bringing together current and future Micronesian leadership to have a conversation on navigating our Blue heritage and future and what all that means. And I think we're going to touch on some really important themes today, ranging from STEM education to women and girls in science to identity and cultural connection to the ocean. So I'm really excited. And this is all in light of Nikki's recent expedition to the Challenger Deep, which is the deepest part of the Marianas Trench and the ocean, which is right here in our FSM backyard. She made history, or rather herstory, by becoming the first Micronesian and Pacific Islander to do so. So thank you so much, President Panuelo and Nikki, for being here. Before I do jump into the first questions, I do just want to know for everyone who is tuning in that you can comment your questions in the comment section, and we will have time to get to those later. Just let us know where you're from and who your question is directed at. And then before we get started, we're just going to show a brief recap video of Nikki's journey. So we'll play that right now for you. Oh my goodness. I still get goosebumps and teary-eyed when I see that video. It's just so incredible. So Nikki, we'll start with you. Well, first, welcome back from, from the bottom of the ocean. Before we get into the details of your awesome voyage, I just want people to get to know you a little bit better. So you're from Pohnpei's, you graduated from Xavier High School. You went on to become a BRMC scholar. You are a Young Pacific Leader alumni. And right now you're pursuing your PhD at UH Manoa in the Marine Biology Graduate Program. Can you just tell us a little bit about what you're studying and more importantly, why that became your passion to pursue? And a little more on why that has led you to become even more passionate about wanting to see more young Micronesians go into the STEM fields.
Thank you, Yolanda. So my research focus is on the effects of climate change on marine plant communities, specifically macroalgae. But the questions I wanted to answer is why marine plants and why are they so important? So marine plants can range from the tiny phytoplankton all the way to the large kelp forests. And believe it or not, phytoplankton alone is responsible for up to at least 50% of the oxygen in our atmosphere. They also provide shelter for juvenile fish and many organisms, and they also provide food for many of our important reef herbivores. Now, they also serve as the foundation of the marine food web. And I love to use the Jenga game as a way to explain this. So for those of you who don't know the Jenga game, it's a block game where you stack them on top of each other, and you're supposed to move a block one by one. But the question is, what happens when you move the bottom blocks, which serve as the base and the foundation? That's just like our plants. And once you remove marine plants from our reef, the whole food web is going to collapse, just as the Jenga game. The whole structure is collapsed. And that's why it's so important for us to be knowledgeable and protect our reefs, especially the marine plants. And even if you look at our food pyramid, at the bottom of that, we have grains and vegetables. So that's the same idea you can apply to the ocean. And so just the well-being of all of us, we really depend on the growth of plants to sustain us. So in regards to STEM education, I've always been a strong advocate for that. And that started during my undergraduate career at Chaminade University of Honolulu. Throughout the years, I realized that there were not many of us in my biology classes, physics classes, organic chemistry, and just even in the sciences in general. So that really opened my eyes. During the summers, I also participated in summer internships, and man, being surrounded by other Pacific Islanders who share the same passion and even the same field, it's another source of motivation. You just want us to multiply in this field. And another experience, like I would go to science conferences as well. And when we see each other Pacific Islanders, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. We get so happy and we stick together at the conferences because we just love being around each other. And so throughout my undergraduate career, I've been so lucky and so blessed to have really strong mentors and advisors to support me and who also share the same goals of trying to bring in young Pacific Islanders. I've had Dr. Gail Grabowski, Dr. Jolene Cogbill at Chaminade University of Honolulu. I've had Dr. Michael Hadfield from UH, who was the PI for the summer internships. My advisor and mentor, Dr. Celia Smith, who was my current graduate advisor, and even Dr. David Spafford, who has supported me since day one. And so this is why we need young Micronesians in the field, because these are the young Micronesian scientists who are going to be out in the water, out in the dirt, collecting data, and they're going to have the fundamental knowledge to understand why things are happening on our land and in our ocean. And not only that, they're going to have that special connection to the land, which will make their work so much more meaningful. And so that's why, having the balance of science and traditional knowledge is so important for us as we move forward to plan and take care of our reefs. And climate change is going to be a long-term issue. And so that means we need a long-term solution. And to me, I really believe that long-term solution is in the education of STEM for our youth. And they're going to be the leaders for tomorrow.
Completely agree. Thank you so much. And I think you touch on a lot of really important pieces. And I love how you have so much enthusiasm towards wanting to see more of us multiply in these fields, and how, this foundation is so important, right? And you also touch on something really important that is a good segue into our next question for the president here. And that's on, this need to combat climate change, and combating climate change and protecting the ocean absolutely go hand in hand. And the FSM is in a unique position to do that. So President Panuelo, the next question goes to you. And I think the stars really aligned perfectly for this expedition to come into play and to become possible, with all of the coordination with different people and groups and orgs that led up to it, and this really kind of nice domino effect. And the common denominator of all of those pieces was this partnership between the FSM government and the Blue Prosperity Coalition that you initiated to form what we now know as Blue Prosperity Micronesia. Can you talk to us a little bit about why you started this program and how other Micronesians can get involved in protecting the oceans, like Nikki is doing through her platform?
Thank you, Yolanda. Before I begin, Nicole, your enthusiasm is contagious. You're already inspiring a lot of students and our citizens out there. Before I begin to go into more substantive issues that Nicole has touched and Yolanda, I would like to first thank you. Thank you, Yolanda, as our coordinator for the Blue Prosperity Micronesia, for organizing this with our team from the Blue Prosperity Micronesia team. Ted Wade, I give him my thanks again as a founder, one of the founders of the program. Nicole, you make us proud, our nation proud. I've watched the video, and what I could really be imagining to think about it and put into perspective is that you've gone as steep as the height of the altitude that we fly at, cruising altitude when you fly. That's what I can think of, right, Yolanda? And Nicole broke record. So congratulations as our dear citizen of the Federated States of Micronesia. I give you a applause with our citizens out there. Really, you make our nation proud as the first Pacific Islander, first woman, and first citizen, or first citizen woman of Micronesia to have gone that deep. I thank the sponsors of folks who took you there, Victor, and all the rest from the pressure drop vessel and their organization. Before I begin, I'd like to wish you all, you two, and our citizens who are listening and watching a very happy Micronesian culture and traditional day. It's a legal holiday here in the FSM. I want to thank our team at Blue Prosperity Micronesia and MCD, and those folks who make things really happen. We're fortunate, and the background you displayed is a beautiful one to show the audience how beautiful our islands are. We're one of the luckiest countries in the world. Yolanda and Nicole, your enthusiasm shows it, that we're living in a really pristine environment. The health of our oceans, our health of our mangrove forests, and the fact that the country, even when we're doing nothing, our huge exclusive economic zone, as we are a big ocean state, contributes to the carbon sink. It's the biggest sequestration of carbon, our ocean. So the most important thing is to protect the health of our ocean. So, what can we say in this time and period of our world where sometimes we think we're at war with the oceans, with the things that are happening, pollution, microplastics. We all read about those kind of things. And then it makes us sad because the things that are happening in our world with the climate change and, global warming, we need to step up our efforts. So we are a country that feels the existential threat of climate change and sees its effects every day. So making sure that our nation and our world makes peace with nature. I don't know if you read, and I would encourage our citizens to read the recent report that just came out from the UN. It's called Making Peace with Nature. And I have a letter that I sent to, I'll be sending to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Guterres, to thank him and ask the global community to really change our ways. Sometimes when you think that a nation is increasing its GDP, but it's decimating forests and the health of our very small planet that we live on, it's sad. I mean, you will feel the sadness as Nicole has demonstrated, importance of algae and its role in playing to help stabilize climate change and all of that. It's such a valuable asset that we have as our exclusive economic zone. Is one of the biggest in the Pacific region and one of the richest. And so your question, Yolanda, overall, our vision for the Blue Prosperity of Micronesia is the effective stewardship of our natural resources by our present generation for the future generations of Micronesia. So Blue Prosperity Micronesia is all about conservation, protection, and preservation of our natural resources, which coincides with our nation's long-term, as you put it, Nicole put it, long-term vision to secure our national maritime zones, ocean resources, the seabed areas, which you've recently visited, to address the continuing negative effects of sea level rise and global warming. So sustainability, if you see and just check the history of our country, it's something that is like a continuum. It's been happening over the previous administrations and continue to be a priority for this administration going forward. Because Nicole, you touched it really right there. I think most of the folks from the industrialized countries, they're youth, young people like your ages, their relationship with food is on the shelves of the supermarkets, right? They don't see it the way we see it. I'm looking at our mountains and the forest out there. We have connection with the land and the ocean because it's our source of livelihood. I mean, isn't it? It's our source of livelihood. And so our role, FSM, my goal is to make sure that our model of sustainable development is one that would be followed by the rest of the world, because as a small island country, our efforts have shown and demonstrated that we are one of the champions of climate change and environmental stewardship to keep this pristine environment intact. We've, both of you understand our efforts. If I touch only two efforts that are connected, is the Micronesian Conservation Trust or the Micronesian Challenge. And you know that area is protecting our nearshore areas for marine protected areas and terrestrial areas in our land. Their aim of reaching 20% and 30% on nearshore stewardship and terrestrial was successful, and they've notched it up to 50% right now to go towards 2030. And so if you look at Blue Prosperity in Micronesia, Yolanda, which you are heading and leading on behalf of the nation as a coordinator of the program, our aim is to look at the ocean resources. National government has a jurisdiction from beyond the territorial of 12 miles, beyond into the bigger, big ocean state that we have. And so our goal, as you know very well, and our citizens as well, is to target conserving 30% of this ocean space that we have. We do, I think recently we celebrated or commemorated the World Forest Day to plant plants and all of that by MCT and others in our nation. but protecting our ocean is one of the biggest efforts that we must to our best efforts to protect it. And so you can see that our effort is there. Congress has passed legislation to extend the 12-mile no fishing zone, which is a state territory beyond the state shorelines or the reef in that case. And we legislated to extend that with extra 12 miles, making it 24 miles of no take zone or no fishing zone. So these are important areas. I think these are already contributing to the objective of Blue Prosperity Micronesia, Yolanda, as you know, and including the nearshore that MCD is doing, which is also country-driven by the members of the MCD, which is the Marshall Islands, Palau, FSM, and the territories of Guam and CNMI with the collective effort. So within FSM, within our protected area network framework policy, we've protected over 60 areas. If you hear the recent ones, Macantoa in Koshai, it's got like a quarter of Koshai being protected as forest cloud, and Department of Interior has recently sent in a grant to help protect that area. Han Biosphere, to name a few, black coral spawning area, and you can extrapolate that into the states. So our efforts is very important that we continue this effort collectively under the MCD and the Blue Prosperity and Micronesia efforts that we are doing. And so it's a continuing effort. If you look at other efforts that the FSM is doing, I've mentioned MCD and the overall objective of Blue Prosperity Micronesia. We are also doing the tuna or technology for tuna transparency, and we're also championing that in terms of observers and transparency of what the fishing boats are doing, mainly the long line, and we're going to graduate into the per se industry as well, so that we understand what's happening in our ocean. It's a collective effort by the members of the Foreign Fisheries Agency, because to protect our marine resources and make sure it's transparent, we cannot do it alone, because the fish are highly migratory and they migrate into other zones, and we have to conserve them in a collective basis. We are also a member of the Palau Nauru Agreement, a conglomerate of the very big ocean states of the Pacific region, devising measures and regulations on how fishing should happen. So it's country-driven, country-owned and country-driven in terms of how we can make it sustainable. So the short version of all of this is that I want to see FSM become a global model for sustainable development, of people's quality of life improving, while at the same time working together with nature, not in opposition to it. It means making sure that paradise in our backyards, it's a word that I've coined, because our paradise is really literally in our backyard, that our paradise in the backyard remains paradise for our future generations. So, how can FSM, so one of the elements of your question, how can FSM citizens get involved? Yolanda and Nicole, the first thing is what Nicole has said. Our citizens can do its part by caring about these topics and making learning about them common knowledge. I think we have these assets, natural resources, but not enough of our citizens really to understand the depth of how important it is to keep it sustainable for future generations. So as a big ocean state, it is important that our citizens can speak with equal parts, enthusiasm and competence on oceans and our ocean resources, like Nicole demonstrated how enthusiastic she was discussing our classes and how this impacts life out there. So this means that we need more students to get involved in the STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, so that the future leaders can understand this and help us fight climate change and global warming. This will This will have the effects of ensuring that our population is aware of the importance of our oceans and oceanic resources. And now our national prosperity is defined in part on how we manage them. We think these days in terms of monetary as assets, but more important, our natural resources and our environment is probably the best long-term asset that we need to protect in the very, very long term. So the next part is because today we're celebrating culture and tradition, I think is to synthesize our traditional knowledge, such as migration patterns of fish and the spawning cycle of turtles, with concrete scientific knowledge, so that we see the effects of protecting our environment as being the same as protecting our culture and our tradition or heritage. So I think that's my take on the question. Is a little bit long-winded, but we can talk so much more in this area, which is exciting. So thank you for that first question, and I look forward to continuing this productive dialogue and friendly talk story.
Kalangan. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Everything that you were talking about reminded me of this really profound question that I came across last year in this gathering with some really wonderful people, including Nikki last year, with some folks from a group called Niatero. And the question was, how do we be good ancestors? And I think all of the initiatives that you're talking about and mentioned are all the ways that we can at least try to be good ancestors. I really love how you make the connection between our connection to the land and the ocean, and that being a central core part of who we are as Micronesians. And I think that's a good segue into the next question I have for you, Nikki. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper here. Before you even left for your trip, before you even got on the ship, I know you did a lot of homework, yeah? I know you were reaching out to friends and family and elders and people in your networks and in other Pacific Islanders, really seeking things like local stories, legends, songs, chants, anything related to the ocean. And you were reaching out to friends who were educators to get questions from their young students, almost as I would say a way to bring us with you on this journey that was so monumental for a lot of us, for everyone who was following this, right? And almost as if in acknowledgement to our ancestors and drawing that connection to honoring our youth as well. So I thought that was a really, really responsible and really aware and a really important way to prepare also. So I'd love if you could just talk to us a little bit about that. Why was this process of essentially bringing us with you an important and necessary part of taking this expedition?
Thank you, Yolanda. Yes, as a Pacific Islander, the first thing we always think about is community. And that's what, when they asked me to represent FSM, I thought of everybody. And I think the best way for me to really have people follow this journey and bring them with me was to collect legends, stories, chants. And like you said, I'm from Pohnpei and Chuk, but I also wanted to know the stories of how our other Pacific Island brothers and sisters connected to the ocean. And so, yeah, I sent out emails, Facebook, IG, text messages, everything to try and really absorb as much knowledge as I could before I left. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who sent me links, resources, books, and even connected me to friends of friends. Also, as like you guys know, education is a huge part of my efforts. And so bringing the youth along, getting them excited about this adventure, and to also help them, make them feel that they were a part of it. I asked questions. I asked them to send in questions, my friends who are educators or who works with youth programs, to send me questions from the youth, because I know as I used to be a youth, we tend to feel left out. And so I thought, getting questions from them was a way for them to be excited. to feel involved and to also participate. And so before I left, I also brought flags from Micronesia, all over Micronesia with me to the Mariana Trench. And those are flags that I want to distribute to educators across Micronesia, across the Pacific, so that they can use those as learning tools for science and history. And so those I will distribute after. And then also I'd like to Zoom with science classes and talk to the kids and, share my experience with them. I also like to shift gears a little and talk about community engagement. We need to be self-motivated, we need to be determined, and we need to be proactive, and we need to work collectively, because that's the only way that we're going to move forward in keeping our oceans protected and clean as well. An example of how I'm active here in Hawaii in the community is I've been participating in the invasive algae cleanup in Waikiki, and that targets a specific reef that's located in front of the Waikiki aquarium. These efforts have started in the year 2002, and this reef was just smothered and overgrown with invasive algae. So as a collective, this event is open to the public, and so whoever passes by, whoever's interested, just grabs a bucket, grabs gloves, and goes down to the reef and help manually remove these invasive algae. And we get people as young as 5-year-olds to even grandma and grandpas coming out. And over time, you see that as we remove these invasive algae, the reef has just changed dramatically. The native herbivores are coming back, the native plants are growing. And so it's just a small effort, a small way to contribute and be proactive in your community. And I've seen on Facebook, like organizations like COA going and picking up trash. And so, as we work together, you can see how beautiful our islands can be.
Amazing. I love how you said at the beginning there, as islanders, we immediately think of community, right? It's not this sense of just self and me and I, but your connection to your family and your community family and where you're from, and remembering that and bringing that with you in all kinds of endeavors. I really love that. I think that's what makes the way we go about pursuing sustainability, and as President mentioned, how that's so core to our culture, and so second nature to us, and it's a big, huge part of our traditional knowledge. And so the need to bring traditional, local, indigenous knowledge up to, valuing it the same way we do with science, modern day science, is imperative. And that's something that I really hope to makes an essential part of the way we carry out Blue Prosperity Micronesia. I love, and I think that's also a great shout out, important piece that could also go back to the question about how we can get more of our community members involved. Is there is definitely a rise in amazing NGOs and orgs like GOA, like the Green Society, and other youth groups around the FSM that are coming up kind of out of a response of this feeling of responsibility and wanting to be proactive and doing amazing things for the community. President Panuelo, the next question is for you. You recently gave a quote in an online article about Nikki's expedition, and it said, "Whether it's my capacity as president of the FSM, my capacity as a Micronesian, or my capacity as a person, I am so proud of Nicole, and I know our ancestors would be proud too. The work she is doing is both awe-inspiring in its importance and breathtaking in its beauty. It is fitting that a Micronesian has finally seen the bottom of the Challenger Deep, the deepest part of the world, and the FSM's territory of the Marianas Trench, and part of our heritage. Nicole has the full endorsement and support of the FSM national government in all her scientific endeavors, and it would be an honor for her to work for the FSM in our ongoing initiatives to tackle the existential threat of climate change and loss of biodiversity." So it sounds like you got a job offer, Nikki. So I think this highlights a couple of really important things, and this also something that Nikki touched on earlier about the importance of STEM and wanting to see more Micronesians in these fields. And I know, President Panuelo, you've recently launched FSM's application for membership into the Western Interstate Commission on Higher Education. Can you talk to us a little bit about this and your administration's efforts on getting better access for higher education for our FSM students, and what other opportunities are out there for our young students who are wanting to pursue these fields?
Thank you, Yolanda. Before I answer directly that question on which I'd like to take the opportunity now to, of course, thank all the colleges and universities out there, Nicole, UH, Manoa, and then our very own College of Micronesia, FSM, and throughout the United States, because they are helping in our development of our human resources, and our human resources are the most important asset for our nation. And so when colleges and universities are developing our human resources in that way, they are helping our nation building process. The college I graduated from, just to put it in perspective, is small, but I can see today that those who graduated are in key positions, right? In the development bank, in government. I'm president of our country. I never thought that one day I'll be a president. People in the private sector, in areas, in Congress. That's just from one little school out in the backwoods of Oregon, Eastern Oregon University. I love that place. And so, the universities, colleges plays a very pivotal role in our nation building process. Here we see Nicole here, so excited and enthusiastic about, taking that knowledge and the science you're learning and putting into practice. I see that you can't wait. That's the feeling I had when I was in college. I can't wait to come out so I can really get out there and just do it, right? And so I can feel that enthusiasm. I felt it, when I was in college, about to finish, to come in and help our nation building process. And so this time around, it's a lot different, right? Because technology, science, and everything else is different from many years ago when I was a college student. So to come back and answer your question, I have to put in perspective that, about annually, our Congress, with the generous help of our Congress, our nation appropriate about $3 million for our FSM National Scholarship Program. In addition to that, we do a merit scholarship that targets legal, development of our legal students out there. And then several other appropriations that help our students in Fiji, Palau, China, Japan, to direct help with the students. I know, Nicole, you're fortunate to be a recipient of the Phil Rayner MCD, right? Is that a scholarship program? So you can see how important this is, the output of our human resource development from the colleges. So I take the opportunity to thank all of the universities out there for the role they are playing in our nation building process. The WICHE program, Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, the effort to become a member of that has been going on in the last few years. I remember I was in Congress. I think the effort was taken on, but not quite finished. It's a sub-regional effort, inclusive of our brothers and sisters from CNMI and Guam, Palau and Marshall Islands, the freely associated states and the territories, and then American Samoa. So I wrote a letter to the new Secretary of the Department of Interior, Secretary Haaland, which is I believe she's a Native American, first Native American to head the Department of Interior. But the kind of the substantial discount that we'll get as students of the freely associated states is very substantial. I think we picked out one school, University of Hawaii. If you're going to school there and your tuition is 40,000+, that's going to literally be cut in half if the membership in which it becomes applicable to our students. So you can see how that, if you extrapolate the numbers, how that will stretch our dollars. If the 3 million is funding X number of students for the FSM, that means it's going to push out with more students getting educated for our resources that we have. And so that's very important. University of Oregon at 40,000 per year, joining which will reduce that annual price to about 21,000. That's the number that I got from our education department that we have here. So over 4 years, I think that's going to be a saving of about 76,000. So you can see that can literally recruit one student over 4 years, recruit an additional student that would not have qualified for the scholarship. So we're doing this in jointly with the Palau, Marshall Islands. I've written a letter to the president of Palau, president of Marshall Islands, and governor of American Samoa, because these are the entities that have not joined the WICHE program. Currently, Guam and CNMI are on the program, so they are benefiting from it. My letter was to ask that the Department of Interior cover the membership fee for all the freely associated states and the territories, because education is a key part of our development, so that our nation can be a nation with educated, skilled individuals that can continue our nation building process. So that's inequity in education outcomes and economic opportunity is a threat to our nation's unity and sovereignty. And so the more that we have skills and educated individuals in our country, the better the outlook will be for our nation's future. I can speak of so many things that are happening, in our country. But what I can say is that regarding FSM or STEM education specifically, you may be familiar with there's a program, and it's science and technology. Remember the Habele program that was put together by retired course, and they sponsored some Yapi students to New York. And I think we won some of those programs by training the students, and that escalated to involve all of our states, to involve them in the science and technology field. And our students adapt so quick and so fast that we're so proud of their development. So that's the WICHE program that we've done. STEM is a priority field for receiving scholarships, and certainly a student who chooses to study science, technology, engineering, and mathematics will be equipped with the skills to contribute to our nation building process. So in a nutshell, that's what that program will do. Most of our students are receiving also Pell Grant. I think it's notched up to 6,500 right now, and the average recipient of our national scholarship about 8,000 per year. Some are more depending on the field, but you can see that with the discount of the WICHE program, the Pell Grant and the scholarship that we receive will basically cover your tuition and the savings and go into other extra costs that you will need to do. So it's going to help even private students who are trying to pursue their education. They'll be qualified for the in-state tuition rather than the very exorbitant cost that the students have to deal with in this time pursuing their education. So that's in a nutshell. If you have specific questions or follow-up, we can definitely also touch on that. But I find education as a priority because myself getting educated at the universities, I felt much more confident in coming back and being part of our nation building process.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. President. And I really hope that all of that useful information matched with the inspiration that our youth can get from stories like this with Nikki's expedition can be something that will further empower our young people to keep going and go forward. Nikki, the next question is for you. So with the records that you set with this groundbreaking expedition includes being the first Micronesian, the first Pacific Islander, only the third woman and the youngest woman to reach the bottom of the Challenger Deep. And to put that into perspective, more people have been to the moon than to the bottom of the ocean. That is mind-blowing for me. That is so crazy. And to think that this part of the world where it's most deep in the ocean is right here in FSM's backyard, that's a really special fact that I didn't even know before this expedition even took place. So this has set off a wave of inspiration for Micronesians and Pacific Islanders, and really just anyone who loves the ocean or adventure and exploring. And what a lot of us Micronesians didn't know was that fact. And I think that was something that we proudly learned together, yeah? So this must have felt like, I would imagine, such a huge sense of responsibility. You know, like, what did that mean to you? And how did you come to feel not just physically and scientifically prepared for the expedition, but also spiritually and emotionally prepared for this journey? Because it was a really, really big moment. And as you said, not just for you, but for our entire community. So talk with us a little bit about that. How did you come to feel prepared and own that sense of, you know, being the first? Because I'm sure it was a really big deal.
Physically, I was healthy, ready to go. Scientifically, I had my resources, my water sample bottles ready to go. But spiritually and emotionally, that's what I really what weighed heavily on me. Like you said, it was a huge responsibility, but it also came with a lot of honor and humility, and that's what really carried me through. You guys saw those who watched the video, it was the canoe that really kept me grounded. The canoe first represented my father. That was his canoe. And he was the first inspiration for me to go into marine biology. So I thank him for sparking that passion in me. Second is my mom. She's the Micronesian, part Filipina. And, you know, my mom is fluent in Chuukese and Punapayan, and she can understand and speak basic Tagalog and Mortlakese. I don't know how she does it, but, you know, it was through her. I've grown up identifying myself as a Micronesian, and, you know, growing up, we always ate all kinds of different food, poke, lao lao. Filipino food was pancit, lumpia, shrimp sinigang, and then we ate all the local foods, you know, breadfruit, bananas, taro. And so I thank her for instilling the traditional island values in me and my siblings, and also showing us how we can really embrace all of our ethnicities. And lastly, the canoe also represented Papa Mao Piailog, who is from Satawal FSM, Yapin FSM, sorry. And he really broke traditional protocol, broke the rules, to share his knowledge with outsiders, with people from not from Micronesia. He came out here to Hawaii in 1976 to navigate the Hokulea to Tahiti. And by him doing that, like I said, he broke protocol. And so that canoe really represented all his sacrifices that he made for the greater good of all of us, to bring navigation, traditional navigation, back to Hawaii and to all of Polynesia. And so I thank him for being brave and courageous, and for breaking boundaries, and for being that Micronesian leader we all strive to be. And so that canoe really represented really all of me, my family, my passion, navigation, our ancestors, and our connection to the ocean.
And I think that's part of what makes this conversation so fitting to take place today, in honoring and celebrating Cultural Day and all of our ancestors that we have to thank and give tribute to. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's a good segue into my next question for you, President Panuelo, and going off of that note, something that Nikki and I have been discussing and have been doing some research on and beginning some dialogue on is about how to go about renaming the Challenger Deep in a way that is reflective and honoring of the fact that it is in Micronesia and honoring the lands that are above this part of the ocean. Because what we learned so far is that actually its name comes from the British Royal Navy ship, the HMS Challenger, which came across it in the late 18th century. So given all of these shared values that we've discussed across identity and culture and connection to the ocean and the importance of all of that, we're looking to endeavor on how do we go about decolonizing that name and indigenizing it and reclaiming it in pursuit of giving it a name that honors where it is and the people around it that it's home to. Is this an endeavor that you think you would support?
Wow. Your imagination is just down to the deepest section of our waters, and then as high as wherever it is, right? So I love the imagination and creativity. Of course, the answer would be a big yes. But before I go into it to discuss a little bit more, I like doing this. There's so much to share. You know, when I was in Congress, it's very worth noting by you and our citizens that, even when I was at the United Nations, the part or what the Seabed Authority, Section 11 or what, when I was overseas in our missions, I was already dealing with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and that's the mechanism by which countries are able to extend, the 200-mile zone beyond islands to gain the vast ocean space that we have. It's about 1 million miles. Yeah, I lost you a little bit. Are we back? Did you miss any of what I was saying? Good. Okay. Okay. So I was saying. So I signed Part 11 of the Seabed Authority. At the time, President Bailey Olger gave me the credentials as acting ambassador in New York at the United Nations to sign Part 11 of the Seabed Authority, basically making FSM as one of the countries, leading and taking the authority from the United Nations Law of the Sea Convention to help us establish, before that and continuing the exclusive economic zone that we too enjoy today. And then fast tracking, when I was in Congress, we realized that we also have to look after our seabed, not just the ocean, but the seabed. And you bring it into focus, Nicole, with your visit that gives it a lot of publicity. But while in Congress, we also began to build the legal framework to manage our seabed. And we came up with what is called, it took me several or a couple of years in Congress to be doing that. And it evolved into what is a 200-some page bill on seabed, the deep seabed mining and all of that. But it was named now as the National Seabed Resources Authority. And it's going to comprise of 5 members, 1 from the national government and 4 from the states. So it's in the process of being, implemented, because the law was passed, and it took me 2 years of running it through our Committee on Resources and Development. So it's one of the major bills that we were able to enact in Congress, and I thank Congress for that. But the point, coming back now to talk about your question, we can. Of course, we can establish that through a congressional resolution or an executive order. As a sovereign country, we can name any part of our ocean, whatever the name is. But Challenger Deep, you're right. In 1875, I think from HMS Challenger, a British vessel, that named it. And then you made me look into it a little bit deeper. I believe the method they did was like, I don't remember the technical name, but they actually weighed on a string that tried to go down however deep it went, try to establish the depth of our sea bottom. So the Mariana Trench is an area that crosses, in the Mariana area, Guam, and into our FSM exclusive economic zone. Also, the Yap Trench is almost like a continuing of one of the deepest areas. And Nicole, you will have better perspective than I. You've been down there. And then we named an area of the Yap Trench, Yap Deep, right? And so that's part of what we're doing. So it's funny, right? Because we've had names that were given to us by the administrators of our land, the colonizers of our country way back. There are some names. Ponabe was Ponabe, and we changed it to the indigenous name, right? Thorn Bay, upon a stone altar, Thorn Bay. And then Chuk also was changed from Truck, right, to indigenize the names. So here we are. Maybe this is our opportunity to colonize the British by naming their name with the local name, right? So we're gonna what do you call, decolonize or the British government by naming a name that is indigenous. So I would support that, but I later learned, because you may have some idea, but our citizens mostly do not have some of the ideas and the efforts that's been done by the FSM. We've claimed an area of the continental shelf that is now part of our jurisdiction, sovereign jurisdiction, an area called Ontong Java Plateau. And it's a very huge area that comprises about, what's the area? It's very huge, about 600,000 kilometers of an area that has become part of our jurisdiction, and it extends beyond the exclusive economic zone. This effort was started way back. We've launched it at the UN around 2009, and only recently, 2017, it was granted to us, because you have to follow the criteria of the submission. And that area is jointly filed by Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands. So only the 3 countries here have the sovereign rights to decide what happens in this 600,000 kilometer area beyond our exclusive economic zone that is now part of our jurisdiction. And this is very important effort that FSM has done. There's also an area that is called Maso Ridge. We are filing and providing information to also claim this area. And then the Eurobic rice. These are areas that extend beyond the FSM exclusive economic zone, so that we're able to, have jurisdiction over it. It takes a long time, but if we don't claim it, others can claim it and become part of their sovereign right to look at exploitation and so forth. So coming back to the bill that we passed, the National Seabed Resources Authority, which I was a member of Congress, chairman of R&D committee, worked on it, and I thank Congress for passing the bill, enacting it, and so now we have that authority, which is the legal framework to regulate our seabed and then the continental shelf beyond. You can see how important this is to our future generations. And so any activity that will be dealing with prospecting, any research, spatial planning, Yolanda and Nicole, that's very important to understand the depths of the ocean, the things we don't understand, the science out there. It can help to help policymakers and the decision makers in the leadership of the FSM to decide. But we can't decide in a knowledgeable way if we don't know some of the sciences down deep in the areas that we need to manage. And of course, this connects to our fisheries, sustainability in fisheries. Right now, our exclusive economic zone, for the information of our citizens, brings in about 60 to 70 million into the national government annually, and that's important. And our fish is finite, the resources are finite, so we have to manage the resources, including the depth of our ocean, Seabed Authority. And so we cannot step out and regulate our seabed if the legal framework is not there. So FSM has completed that and is part of our sovereign nation to administer, regulate seabed and all the resources that are out there. So the Challenger Deep, I'm willing to work with you, our Blue Prosperity Micronesia. Nicole, you can participate. I'm thinking that we can do a national event, a contest that can be put out there so we can democratize that process, and it'll be exciting so it can generate publicity and get our youth involved, the students who are studying STEM area. And so we can rename it. That process as a sovereign country is simple, but I understand we have to launch this if we want international recognition and international approval. We have to send it to a body that's called International Hydrographic Organization, and then Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO to file this name and get the sort of international approval for international sort of recognition and acquiescence on our naming. But we can do it as a nation, and it'll be sort of limited to within the country. But if we do it via the international mechanism, then it's going to generate more publicity, and we can take the opportunity of decolonizing or colonizing, however you can put it, the 1875 event by the Challenger vessel from British government, and name it local. So can we kind of be in agreement that this could be a process where we can involve our citizens, our youth, to have a contest and maybe have a core group to make some recommended names that can come to the government for approval before we begin that process of making that name change. How about that?
I love that idea. What do you think, Nikki? Thank you so much. That is really good to hear, and we're so glad to hear and that you're supportive of such an endeavor. And it's really good to know that we have these existing frameworks and past experiences to draw from. So that's really good news, and we look forward to working with you more on that. We're down to our last two questions. I know we're coming up on time, so I'll just put these last two questions, and hopefully we will be able to take a couple of the questions from the comments. So Nikki, the last question for you that I have here is just in general for young people and our students who are watching or who have been following your journey that are interested in pursuing STEM fields, or who are just adventurous or explorers in their own rights, that are inspired by your story and are embarking on their own journeys and forging their own way. What advice could you give them?
Okay, first advice, do not forget where you come from. Really, no matter where you go, what you do, let that always be the core. Be proud of where you're from. Be proud to be Micronesian, Polynesian, Melanesian. Be proud to be a Pacific Islander, because really when things get tough, that's what's gonna keep you going. And just remember what our ancestors have went through for you to be here today. You know, think of all the sacrifices. We are here today for a reason, okay? And we have a purpose. Secondly, find what you love by exploring. Our ancestors were explorers. It's in our blood. Don't be afraid to step out of the box. Take advantage of all the resources, your mentors, your advisors. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And I know I struggled with that throughout my whole undergrad career. You know, ask questions. It's okay not to know everything. After being in school for so long, I still don't know the answers to everything. So ask questions. And finally, don't be afraid to be the first. You know, it reminds me of my days at Lengar. Me and my family would go for family picnics, and all of my cousins and I would line up on the bridge, and we would wait for the first person to jump. right? And once that first person jumps, then everybody starts jumping. So don't be afraid to be that first person, because you're gonna set the stage for those that come after you. Set it high, you know, and don't let it be let's see, don't let it be a challenge or a competition to bring others down, but make it an opportunity to lift each other up.
Love it, love it, love it. I think that's a great way to wrap up this part of our talk story before we take questions from the audience. So President Panuelo, so just talking on the offshore component of Blue Prosperity Micronesia and this connection that people have been able to see it now and have this tangible connection to it through getting to know the Challenger Deep through this expedition. One of the core goals of the Blue Prosperity Micronesia is to sustainably plan for and conserve 30% of our waters. I'm wondering, what is your dream, long-term, long-lasting, vision for how this could be successful, or what would this being successful look like for generations down the line?
Thank you, Yolanda. I think the success that we all need to build is the sustainable use of our resources and stewardship of our natural resources. But someday maybe money will not be the value that we see it. But if we sustain our natural environment, that's the connection that we all can and have our livelihood founded on. These are very important. And so I think that's my long-term dream, is to be developed as the marine spatial plan that we are looking at under the Blue Prosperity Micronesia, is to look at building that kind of plan, and our Blue Economy Plan will be the scientific guiding principles for current and future leaders and decision makers to look at. And so that Blue Prosperity Micronesia will result in FSM passing legislation to gain that 30% aim that we're trying to do. We've done already by the no fishing zones that we've legislated. Maybe some areas that we can think of is, the resources are finite, definitely. Now we're lucky that we're able to derive revenues from that. If we don't take bold actions today to protect and safeguard our environment as a responsibility, as guardians of our nation, good stewards of our resources, then I think future generations will not enjoy the kind of livelihood that we enjoy today. So it may take, designating a section of our exclusive economic zone, because we will have learned where the fishing are running around, and maybe carve out a neutral, safe zone where fish can go, and within that area, maybe we can call it no fishing zone, so they can regenerate the population. I was watching a documentary last week on sea piracy. It's very educational. I recommend you look at it. We're really being decimated, our oceans out there, the world's oceans. And I think it's becoming so small that if we don't take these bold actions in concert with our Pacific Island countries under Foreign Fisheries Agency, because we can do it successfully as a nation, but it's not going to be as successful if we do it alone, because these are migratory species. You got to do it in a jointly with our Pacific Island countries to keep our ocean be the only area in the world that has rich resources that we can continue to depend on financially, and also by way of our food security. And so these are very important. And fortunately, our partnership with the Blue Prosperity Micronesia, we are partners with Ted Wade and the Wade Institute, Oceans 5, National Geographic Society, Pristine Seas. Last year, or was it this year, that we were scheduling to have that research vessel to come in to bring in scientists to do the marine spatial planning. That's going to start out in Yap to Chuk, Bay, and Koshai, and do a film documentary to also highlight our area. So marine spatial planning is component of that. That's going to go deep to understand the things that we don't understand in areas where Nicole reached. It's also going to take into account our spawning areas for turtles. Yap can decide where to have that area filmed. Pohnpei can decide whether it's a non-Madol area as a important world heritage, or another island that can showcase the efforts we are doing to protect our marine areas. And then Koshai can maybe showcase a terrestrial area, I'm not sure, or somewhere else to be able to showcase that. And I think, some of the useful spatial data would be for marine spatial planning, would include catch and fishing efforts, observer data, and the things that we don't understand that can formulate the data of information. NORMA, our entity that's doing all of this, is putting together information management system of our oceans that can help guide decision makers and policy makers. And so without going too long, we look forward. As a matter of fact, if you talk to our Blue Prosperity Micronesia team, I will be engaging Ted Wade to ask that we begin talking about a timeline for that Nat Geo pristine seas to come into the FSM to film these important areas and show it to the world, and also underwater doing that marine part, spatial planning. So I intend to engage him to ask that we begin talking about a time frame, because I think in the month of May, we plan to begin bringing back our stranded citizens. I know it's a very big emotional, financial toll on them, and I thank them for their sacrifice. And then slowly opening up our borders with the vaccine having reached our country. So to conclude, we're fortunate that our country is one of the very few countries without the COVID-19. And we have a vaccine that's out there to inoculate our citizens for the overall health of our country. So I thank our citizens who are stranded. I know they've been very unhappy, but these tough decisions would have to be made for the safety of our country. But vaccine is here, and then there's hope at the end of the tunnel. And May we plan to begin bringing back our citizens. And so in the context of our citizenry and citizens watching our program, I want to thank them, and thank you all for being good citizens of our country and understanding the very difficult decisions that we have to make for the safety of our country. So on this program, coming back, it's exciting. We look forward to the event that Blue Prosperity Micronesia will bring in, and we'll schedule it and be hopeful that our youth and our citizens will engage and be empowered with the information and the enthusiasm, excitement coming from Nicole and you, Yolanda, as key youth folks, pivotal in our nation building process. So thanks so much again for having me on this.
Thank you, Galangan. Okay, so we'll just take maybe 2 questions now from the questions that we got from our audience that are tuning in. The first one is for you, Nikki, and it's coming from Laura Frank. She's asking, what was the most difficult part about the trip? Close quarters, hunger, stress, and what was your favorite moment?
So most difficult part for me, honestly, was really trying to represent all of us. That was what I really tried my best to do. And I hope that I did that. I hope that you guys felt that you came on the trip with me. Close quarters, because I'm small, the the limiting factor was pretty spacious for me, but I don't know about Victor because he's pretty tall. Hunger, there was, let's see, I brought down 2 granola bars, a traditional Austrian strudel, and ham and cheese sandwich. So I ate half on the way down and ate half on the way back up, and we had a little tiny bottle of water. So thank you to Manfred and Warren, who were the crew chef and patisserie chef, for making my food. Yeah, stress level. It was really trying to balance everything with the expedition and keeping on track, keep on track with my my teaching assistant duties at UH Manoa, and also trying to get some writing done as well, and keep in touch with MCT and try to answer all of your questions. Let's see, my favorite moment was when we were at the bottom. We only floated 2 meters above the ground, and I honestly just couldn't believe my eyes that we made it. And that was the moment I was preparing for, and it finally happened. And yeah, I just want to thank Victor Vescovo and the whole crew, DSSV Pressure Drop crew, for really allowing us to be a part of this opportunity. And I hope that it'll open doors for other young FSM citizens to be a part of their future expeditions.
Awesome, thank you. And one question for you, Mr. President, that came from our audience tuning in. Speaking of Norma, this is coming from Matthew Chiquil. He's asking, how about designating the high seas as MPAs? That might be a noble effort by the UN and world communities. Thoughts on that?
Yes, of course. You know, Matt Chiquil is one of our really knowledgeable folks within our government. I admire the man, technical and fisheries, however you call it. Of course, you know, he definitely, he's the deputy director of NORMA. That's our National Oceanic Resources Authority. And so that's very important office. Matt, thank you for the question. Of course, I think designating our IC's pocket is one of the options, and that's being discussed within the mechanism of our Western and Central Fisheries Commission, what we know as Tuna Commission, based in the FSM. So these issues will be brought to the management capacity of the Tuna Commission and its members to look at regulating these IC's pockets to give that breather zone for fish to be able to regenerate in those areas. And so Matt and Eugene at NORMA are among our very, very important assets in managing and you know, our fisheries resources with our R&D department from near shore to our open oceans out there. So absolutely, those are issues that we can work on, and as part of the effort to preserve and protect our very important marine resources for our livelihood. Kailangan.
Kailangan. I think that's all the time we have to take questions, but we can certainly try to keep answering them through writing on our Blue Prosperity Micronesia Facebook page. I just want to take this time to thank everyone for tuning in, to thank you, especially Your Excellency, Mr. President Panuelo, and of course you, Nikki, as well, for joining us today and celebrating Cultural Day with us by having this conversation. Thank you so much. And I'll just give it to you to give any closing words if you have any.
With all that's been said, I just hope that we all can work together and move forward in protecting our reefs, because we have a lot of resources, and I think we, as you said, we can be a leading nation in this field.
Thank you.
Yolanda and Nicole, I want to thank you for putting together the program, and all of our friends and partners who made it possible. Let's hope we can do similar, you know, talk story again on some important topic in the future. All the best. Enjoy your holiday, Micronesia Culture and Traditional Day. It's a public holiday throughout the FSM, and my my best to all of our dear citizens out there who are listening and watching the program. Kalangan, Kilisho, Kamangar, and Kulo Mulalab.
Thank you.